I am so excited for this next part of our day. So today is all about partnerships. It's the theme of the event. You are absolutely one of the most important stakeholders we have in this work. And we know we can't do it if not doing it all together. So we know the issue of hunger, it's too big for us to solve on our own. Philabundance, through the support of all of you, we serve 135,000 households per week. And so today we have churches, mosques, synagogues, nonprofit organizations, and schools here, all entities with direct ties to their community who are working together to help us address the need. So I'm thrilled today to moderate a panel of speakers to discuss what partnerships mean to them and provide us with their insights into what makes a good partner for each of their area of focus. So it's great to have partners inside and outside of this room who are working to end hunger. And we know that we need partners in government to ensure that we have what the people need and access to resources and support. So I have an incredible group of panelists here, but just for the sake of time, because I know we're going to dive into a bunch of questions, I want to make sure that you have a chance to ask them as well. I'm just going to introduce them all, and then we'll jump right in. So to my far right, to your left, I have Barbie Izquierdo. She is the Director of Advocacy and Neighbor Engagement at Feeding America, and I believe a Philly native. So welcome, Barbie. Next is Sheldon Good. He is the Director of Development and Strategic Direction of Manna on Main Street and a newest award winner. So thank you, Sheldon. Next to Sheldon is Dixie James. She is the Vice Chair of Philabundance's Board of Directors, and also, when she has all that extra free time, the President in Central Region of Einstein Healthcare Network for Jefferson Health. So thank you, Dixie. Then we have Dr. Zulene Wilkinson, the Deputy Director of Babashi Transition to Hope. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And last and certainly not least, John Gonzalez, the Chief Operating Officer of the Cathedral Kitchen. So thank you, John. So to start us off, I'm just going to ask each of you to answer a quick question just so that we can get everyone's voices in the space. So can you share how you would define a successful partnership in the work that you do? And how do you bring diversity, equity, and inclusion to the partnerships that you have? So I'll start with you, John, and then we can go down.
Sure. Thanks for having us. This is amazing, by the way. A successful partnership for us, common values, common goals. Hospitality is extremely important to us as an organization, and partnering with someone like Philabundance that embraces that sense of hospitality for our guests as well is incredible. So I think someone with a similar value system is amazing.
Thank you. I've really been recently interested in the new literature that's coming out on scarcity. And I'm thinking that one of the major things we have to do is to eliminate this emphasis on scarcity. Because as one author puts it, a focus on scarcity is involuntary. And because it captures our attention, it impedes our ability to focus on other things. And so even as providers and helpers, getting away from a scarcity mentality is something that I think is really important. And a tunneling mentality, what we can do now may be limiting because it really keeps us from thinking about what might be in the future. So scarcity impacts us in our ability to even be creative about how to get out of things. And then I was thinking about crafting the message or reframing the message is very important in a partnership. We don't want the same old message, but we need to make it clearer to people what it really means to be in a hunger situation. Thirdly, advocating where we need to advocate together. And that then goes across all lines. Our visitors, we call our visitors to the pantry just that. We don't call them clients. So our visitors can help us, our staff can help us, our leadership can help us, government can help us. One more thing, collaborations that matter. Really, to get beyond, I've got enough for me and my pantry, but to really look at how we as partners in the fight against hunger can work together in many different spheres. I don't think we've even considered all of them.
Well, first of all, hello everyone. And my answer, it's a great question, Dorothy. And I will say that consistent with what we've heard so far, I certainly think collaborative relationships, shared passion is important for strong partnerships. But I also think that the ability to be open-minded and flexible and forgiving and innovative with one another, because the solution is sometimes buried in the work that we have to do to augment ourselves and develop something new together. So the idea of being very flexible, open-minded, and innovative, I think, is important.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and participate. And thanks again to Lori and Dorothy, Rachel, the whole team for the award. It's an honor. At Man on Main Street, in terms of partnerships, we're in the business of ending hunger. And so for us, first and foremost, it's always the question of, is this partnership going to get us closer to ending hunger and increasing food security? Sometimes we can actually lose sight of that if we're not intentional about it. And I would say it's quite prescient that this is titled like cultivating partnerships. I think partnerships need to be that, cultivated. I think of it in some ways in terms of a partnership is like a marriage in a sense. It requires consistent communication and cultivation. Really launching a partnership is just the end of the beginning. You can't just launch a partnership and then just sort of let it roll, right? It requires that constant cultivation and communication. So for us at Man on Main Street, it was mentioned earlier, we translate in terms of the DEI question into 7 languages, all of the materials that our participants see. And that's because in North Penn School District, where we're located, Lansdale, in central eastern Montgomery County, there's 40 languages spoken throughout the school district, which is our primary footprint. 40. And so for us to even do 7 is just scratching the surface. And in addition to just those translations, which are actually done by Nationality Services Center based right here in Philadelphia, we have a partnership with Aclamo, the largest Latino-serving organization in Montgomery County. And we've partnered with Aclamo to actually bring their services to our building. So Aclamo has a caseworker embedded with MANA. It's an Aclamo employee, or several, who spend time several days a week providing Aclamo services, connections to public benefits, education, employment, rental assistance, et cetera. But then also they can literally walk a couple of feet and introduce them to MANA services, all bilingually in English and Spanish. And so to be able to have staff who can say, here's how you could get meals if you want them, here's how you can shop in MANA's market and get groceries. And to we have some capacity for language on staff at MANA, but to be able to have a partner like Aclamo who's trusted in the community to not only provide their own services, but to provide those connections directly with us is invaluable.
To me, in my role, a good partnership has to start with uplifting dignity. I think that regardless of your role, I work directly with neighbors, I work with food banks, I work with other employees internally at Feeding America, and for me, as a person with lived experience, the first thing that I felt was stripped away from me was my dignity. I felt a lot of shame. So I want to make sure that however I approach a partnership always feels dignified for the person that I'm working with. The second thing that I would say in any partnership, I think of the corporate world, right? In any partnership, they're always mutually beneficial. So I want to make sure that the neighbors that I'm working with have something that tangible that they feel like is bettering their life, is giving them more exposure, or whatever the case may be. I feel like opening up these avenues and giving more opportunities to people who are actually experiencing hunger is very, very, very important to this work. So I think the third aspect of having a really good partnership is incorporating the people who are affected in the blueprint. Too many times, I think that we all feel like we know the right answer or that we're headed in the right direction, but we don't always include the people who this is impacting. So a good partnership to me would be talking with those people, letting them know that we also have to share power, right? If we're sharing a platform, we have to share power. In any sort of partnership, usually both people, 3 people, 5 people, all have an equal say in the decision making. So giving some of that decision making power back to neighbors so that they feel motivated, important, and empowered is very important in my work as far as making sure that that these partnerships are good, they're respectful, and that they're building this relationship. As you shared, they have to be consistent. You have to show face. You have to show that you're about what you're saying. It isn't always just say, hey, we're here to help you, but how are you showing up when you're offering the help?
The next question is, as we all know, the theme today is power of partnerships. However, partnerships can be in very different stages, right? And so, honestly, there are some strong partnerships, there are some blossoming partnerships, and there might be some partnerships where you might need to have a couple tough conversations, right? So, another question that I have for all the panelists is, how do you navigate challenges in a partnership where goals or tactics may not align? And I know that Barbie had talked about wanting everyone to have that equal voice being at the table, but we know that this happens too. So again, how do you navigate challenges in a partnership or where goals or tactics may not align? And I think since John set up first, we can kind of go down the line again.
I remember a partnership around hunger that I was a part of where it was a soccer team. It was a soccer team that is really focused on recreation for children, after school programming, but they found that food insecurity was an issue. They couldn't figure out how to get the food to people, and I had food. And so it was a natural kind of conversation that we never would have embraced had we not been in a setting like this, a networking session. And as I listened to what they were doing, I said out loud, well, I have food and you have families. Let's talk about that. And we were able then to initiate bringing food to soccer practices and meeting the needs of families who might never come into our center.
So it's an interesting question because we started off saying that a good partnership really requires that you have sort of that alignment and that passion from the start. But to your point, sometimes that doesn't always survive the entirety of the partnership. And I think that that's where the idea of compromise becomes really important to salvage and getting back to the why. I mean, we may not have common ground on everything, but there's a strong likelihood that because we started the partnership, there are things that align. So finding those common threads and really harkening back to those, and then finding a place of compromise.
This is just a really seemingly simple thing, but in the past year, we launched a partnership with all 6 of our local police departments. One of the only areas, I think, where 6 separate police departments are collaborating together, admittedly. And the Lansdale Police Department had actually approached Man on Main Street saying, look, we're on the front lines. We encounter people who are facing hunger all the time. That may not be the first reason why we encounter a household, but it is often present. And rather than simply, suggesting, hey, maybe check out Man on Main Street, they said, what if we actually just had bags of food that we had in our vehicles as we're driving around and encountering people? And so we set up this partnership with that was initially we were contacted by Lansdale Police Department, but then all 6 local departments. And as we were, as I was, working through setting this up, I had initially kind of given the nod to the Lansdale Police Department as the one who had first reached out about this, but it eventually, through communication, became very clear that this was a joint partnership, equal partners across all of the departments, and that became really key to the unification of the goals of this project, this partnership. And so if, I was sort of blind to that at first, thinking, hey, you maybe want recognition as being the one who kind of thought of this, right? But it actually was very apparent then that this needed to be a shared, mutually shared partnership. And so that I wouldn't have ever noticed that if we hadn't talked that through and each asked questions of each other. And so I think that's just emblematic of the need to constantly be in communication with our partners so that it doesn't lead to resentment or confusion or lack of satisfaction down the road.
Well, I have faced a lot of challenges throughout my journey. I've been working in the anti-hunger space for about 15 years, and it started with me telling my story. I would get on stages just like this and have to admit to strangers that I didn't have enough to feed my kids, that it wasn't easy, and that I was on public assistance and was constantly faced with the stigma of, welfare queens and people growing up in poverty and not wanting to work. And so I had to go into rooms constantly feeling like I needed to show people that I wasn't that. And throughout my career, going from the person who was sharing their story to the person who's sharing expertise, sometimes I'm still expected to show up in a room and people are like, what does it feel like to be hungry? And I'm like, well, the more important question is, what am I doing to help people to not face hunger? And I think that for me, when I face challenges, I call it out, and I joke all the time about my North Philly personality, but I have to say, like, when things don't fly, it just doesn't fly. So if I have an issue with it, I'm gonna be like, hey, I think that, like, this is great what you're doing, but I feel like you can do it better if you did it this way. And I also think that having those conversations, communications, as all the panelists have shared, is the most important part. Not being afraid of having those difficult conversations, talking about the realities of analysis paralysis, when you're faced with these challenges and you're talking about it and then you're afraid to do anything because you don't want to continue making those same mistakes. And it's like that acknowledgement is the first step towards making that change. So I'm always that first person to be like, hold up, what you say? You gonna do what? No, we're not doing that. And I was talking to, I'm not sure who I was talking, I think I was talking to Desiree earlier, telling her that Feeding America has an amazing bunch of people that work for the organization. And when I show up in that way, they can so eloquently say, well, what Barbie means is, to take sort of that attitude away from it. But aside from the analysis paralysis, what I would really love to point out as far as challenges is the intention versus impact. I think that when we're going back to the why, the common values, the things that we share, having that conversation with the people who are impacted by the decisions that you're making, to be able to say, I understand that your intention was to bring more food to the community, but honestly, what's happening is, because of COVID, people aren't coming out to get it. And now, looking at those things and seeing the difference between, this is the intention we had when we started, but this is how our work is actually impacting the community, and facing those things and bringing the community in to help find some of those solutions is what I have found most effective in resolving conflict.
Can I add Yeah, I think Barbie touched on something really important there about communication. I think we're often focused on how do we communicate with our guests, how do we communicate with each other in our organization. But I think communicating with our partners is just as important. We're all in these missions. We're all running 100 miles an hour. Not enough time in the day for all of us, I'm sure. And I think to stop occasionally and just have that honest conversation. Are we on the same page? Is what you're saying? I think I know what you're saying. I love that someone translates for you. That's awesome. A California boy, so I need a translator occasionally myself. But I think that's fantastic. And like the police officers, carrying the food in their car. I mean, what a great outcome from a conversation. I mean, had that conversation never happened, it sounds like such a simple but brilliant thing. It's amazing. And also for your organization, putting things in 7 languages. I mean, someone just has an idea. And I think that's a great thing about partners also. Listen to your partners, because people have really good ideas. Surround yourself with really smart people, because I think most of the time the ideas come and you just have to be the person in the room to listen and realize that's a really good idea. I'm going to steal that or share that. So yeah, thank you all. I learned everything from all of you guys.
The idea of surrounding yourself with very smart people is something that intrigues me, because I think that we have a sense of who may be smart and who may not be so smart. And the truth is that there's a commonality here around hunger. I was thinking the other day, maybe you'll all join me with this. I can't remember what I wanted to eat. Maybe it was a Philly cheesesteak. Maybe it was that, a Philly cheesesteak. And I was living somewhere where there were not Philly cheesesteaks. They called it Philly cheesesteaks, but they were not Philly cheesesteaks. And how do you translate that to people who might be partners, people who are in a corporate setting and who have no sense of what hunger is? That's hunger. When there's something that you would really like to eat, something that you'd really like to have, and you know that there's no way that you're going to get that. That's what hunger could feel like. If I put myself in that place, then I can understand why persons who are different culturally than I would find my pantry unappealing. And I don't even know, because I haven't had anybody to translate for me. But the whole idea of putting ourselves really in a place where we have experienced hunger, and it may not last always, but we have experienced it.
Thank you. So that was a perfect segue. I think Dr. Wilkinson set me up. So I'm going to ask a question for you, Barbie. So with your new role at Feeding America, but also if you haven't had a chance, I would just sneak peek Google Barbie. She has so many incredible things that you can find on her, just all of her philanthropic work and how she's really been such a strong advocate for this work. So the question I have for you is, how can organizations better engage with individuals with lived or living expertise as full-on partners on this work?
I think number one would have to be showing up authentically. I'm not going to curse because I'm going to be professional, but people who have lived experience can smell a lie. I'm just going to put it like that. Y'all know what I'm trying to say. They can tell when you're putting on a show for them. They can tell whether you are asking them how was their day because you care, or how was your day just because they're in your face. And we know that when people are fake or they feel like they don't care, we don't want to be surrounded by that. So I think showing up authentically, being consistent. Growing up here in Philadelphia, there were a lot of different organizations that said, we can help you with this, we can help you with that, but you never saw them in the community. And then I was able to also see organizations like Esperanza in the Hunting Park section that put their money where their mouth is. They started schools, they started community programs, Career Link, all of these different things. Showing up in the community and staying there lets people know that when they're living in their struggle and going through poverty, this is what they see every day. These are the names that they see every day. These are the faces that they see every day. So if your name as far as an organization is out there, but your people aren't, or they're not feeling connected to you, it's not gonna work. So I think one of the reasons why I've been so successful in this role is because I can be myself. And it can be a little off-putting sometimes, but I also know that smart looks different. I'm a very smart person, and I know that I can show that. So I have a good balance of coming into the group with people from North Philly and being like, hey girl, what's up? I grew up in Hunting Park, how you doing? And also being like, I was appointed by President Biden to the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition to represent y'all and to show y'all that y'all can do this too. And while still acknowledging that I am very privileged and I am very blessed, because I'm one of the few people that was able to take my struggle and turn it into success, only because someone cared. Because there's millions of people that are smarter than me, just as smart as me, who have interests in a bunch of different social justice topics that will never make it to stages like this because they don't have the right resources, they don't have the right networks. So whenever I'm in these platforms, I want to remind y'all that the me's are sitting right next to you. The me's are the people who are receiving the bags and who are wanting to help at the food bank because they know what it feels like. So building these partnerships with people with lived experience, you have to show them that you know that they have a voice, not that you're giving them a voice. You have to show them that you're sharing your microphone, your platform, because this isn't something that they have access to. You have to show them that you genuinely care for their community and that this isn't we're gonna hold an event in Hunting Park and never come back, because people will remember that. One of the things that people in poverty go through the most is having their choices stripped away from them and being promised things that people either can't follow up with or can't do in the first place. So when we're met with people of power who say, we're gonna help you, and then we don't see it, when we already have a distrust of government, this only reflects more in the relationships with nonprofits because it's too similar. And we don't want to take that chance of, especially in this work, where we have to be so transparent and are expected to give up so much vulnerability and so much of our personal lives to then never hear from someone again. It just doesn't make sense. So throughout my career, what I've done is every time somebody gave me a business card, I tell them to their face, like, I'm gonna hold you accountable. When you get my email, you better respond. Because there's been too many times in my life that I didn't have that. And now as a director, I love being able to go back into the community and work with food banks and say, who are the stars that you know are talented, but they might not see it? Or they are change makers, but may not have the courage to step out. Let me talk to them. Let them see themselves in me so that they can know that they don't have to be utilized just to tell their story. They have so much more insight that they can provide that is valuable to this work. And if they have the opportunity, they will be able to do that. And it's just, this is so hard. I can't explain to y'all how many times, I'm surprised I haven't cried already, but I can't explain to y'all how many tears I've shed having to talk about all of these embarrassing things just so that I can feel like a change is gonna happen or being made. But it also feels good to know, I used to do this with my friends, right? We used to sit on the steps and be like, this program just ain't working for us. What can we do? And to know that it started off with just those conversations with my friends and meeting that one person that was from an organization that said, hey, you got something interesting to say. Why don't you say it on this stage? And it's absolutely transformed my life. So all I want to do is to continue to create partnerships with people who look and feel like me. The corporate partners are important, food banks are important, and all of that is great. But personally for me is that tied to the community, because when I was living deep in the trenches and in poverty, I didn't have anyone to look up to that was doing this work. I didn't have anyone that was so ready to be like, this is my life. That was my job. And having the label of like the face of hunger and having to think about the impact on my children's lives who, you know, they didn't choose to have all of these stories about them out there in the public. It's hard. So in showing up authentically, if we show appreciation for people's struggles, if we acknowledge that they also have dreams that to them feel so intangible, just like resonating with the people that you help is life-changing. And now that I'm crying, I'm gonna stop.
Thank you, Barbie. Thank you. Thank you, Barbie. And in case you missed it, appointed by the president to a committee. So can we get another round of applause for that? That's incredible. So Barbie, thank you so much for sharing and certainly for all the work you're doing to advocate for our neighbors in need. So I'm gonna flip the script a little bit and ask kind of the same question back to our partners. So this question really is for Zuline or Sheldon or John. Really hearing what Barbie just shared, can you discuss how your organizations engage with the people that you serve, really so that they do have a seat at the table. They really are the true partners in this work. And whoever wants to go.
Well, at Bibashi Transition to Hope, that's exactly what we're doing. We are walking alongside people who are at a place in their lives that they need what we have to offer. And we listen. We have a community advisory board that shares insights with us about our services, what's working, what's not working, and we then take their ideas and we make them real. You saw a wonderful presentation of our Food First Pantry that is now a mini market. That came because our visitors shared with us what their needs were and how they felt about coming into a place and receiving a bag of food, perhaps half of which weren't part of their palates. And I also have heard stories that we would see cans of food or boxes of food along Spring Garden Street, where people left them as they left our premises. They left them along the way because these were things that they didn't really want. So literally engaging our visitors, engaging our participants, and really being authentic about wanting to hear what they'd like to do. Giving people dignity and giving people choice. I want that, you want that, everybody wants that.
I would say I have had the pleasure to come out to Bibashi, and for those of you that were in the Healthy Pantry Initiative session, your choice market is incredible. So just the way that it was set up, and your staff just had so much kindness and compassion for everyone that was coming in from different stages of life. So thank you for sharing. Sheldon or John, did you want to?
Yeah, I think to kind of to follow on what you were saying, Doctor, similar at Cathedral Kitchen, you know, we have many conversations about what people want, and you realize that's kind of a pointless conversation. Let's just ask someone what they want. So we started doing guest surveys. And, you know, just like if we leave the restaurant today, there might be a survey. What did we like? What did we not like? So we did guest surveys. We started getting fantastic feedback about what we were doing right, what we were doing wrong. We love that our guests are not afraid to tell us what we're doing wrong, because there's a lot of things we could be doing better. And one of the things that came from that was we started a personal care, which is not necessarily our genre. We feed people. I'm a food person, but we realized that many of our guests needed personal care items, whether it was deodorant, whether it was feminine products, whether it was underwear, what have you. So we now, once a week, some volunteers who are absolutely amazing, give a list to a guest. They come up and you check off just the items that you would like, because I don't know if you need deodorant or not. And if you don't need it, that would be a really silly thing to carry around when everything you own you're carrying around with you. And we now have and like you said, it's a choice. There's dignity in it. When I go to the store, someone doesn't hand me a bag, I think these are the things you're gonna need. No, I'd like to pick out the things that I could use. And people are so grateful, and it's amazing. And I think we serve about 250 guests every Monday now just with our personal care items. And unlike Barbie, I'm not a crier, but like literally kind of gives me shivers to think about, again, just listening to people and what they need, what will make your life better to get to tomorrow. And that's been really inspiring for me. Again, I'm a restaurant person. I'm not the person that comes with these grand ideas, but be smart enough to listen and say that's a really good idea. Let's meet people where they're at. Really important.
Yeah, I would just say, just to kind of add, I think what's so important is to think about, when I think about dignity and equity, it's really, I know all of us are here working on food insecurity, but it's really about the holistic approach to serving a person, right? And so I love to hear that. And just, how many of you in the audience are doing any work that's beyond food as well? So I know that, so I just wanted to see a show of hands, how many of you are doing? That's great. So we're interested in learning more about that as well, and really thinking about the holistic care piece. Sheldon.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak to ways that Manna, engages our partners, but I think just for the sake of time, I would piggyback off of this idea that we have to be able to follow through. Like, there's been too many broken promises, broken trust, that if you're going to ask for feedback, ask for engagement, ask for participation, you got to be able to follow through on the other side of things. Yeah, so thanks for naming that, Barbie.
So another thing that we're absolutely talking a lot about in this space is really thinking about our role in health equity work or nutrition equity work. So the next question I have is for Dixie. So healthcare institutions are large entities that can be at times difficult for outside groups to navigate. How can organizations like the partners we have here today best connect with places like Jefferson and Einstein?
That's a great question, and I just want to say a few things before I dovetail into that. First of all, sitting here representing, I have multiple hats on, right? I'm a board member at Philabundance. I've been on the board for 7+ years, a passion around food insecurities. I'm also sitting here with my health system hat on. I've been working in healthcare for 15+ years, serving underserved communities, fighting the health equity fight, looking at health disparities and the gap in the mortality rate, and that's the rate at which people die based on the lack of access to health care and food and other things. So, and listening to it, and I've sat in rooms with people that have had lived experiences. I'm in my ED, I'm in my, many of my employees are the people we're talking about. And I will say that there is a separation in the mind of people who want to do good at the very senior level of these organizations. So I said I'm on the board of Philabundance, but I have a board at Jefferson Health, and I listen to them, and it's not for a lack of desire. I think they overpromise because they get excited, and they don't take the time to pause and say, let me ask. And that's been something that I've been very vocal about at every level, both on the healthcare side. How do you create access? Well, let's not cook it up in a boardroom. Let's ask. How do you give people food that they want? Well, let's not decide based on what our experience is. Let's ask. And I think we're making progress, and I think that managing expectations and using the desire to do good in a way that, to your point, is not intention but really impact is a journey that we all have to be on and do together. And that's part of the partnership we ought to be curating. So I just want to say that. And now I want to answer your question. As it relates to these big organizations, what I can say with a a high degree of confidence is that all of the health systems across Southeast Pennsylvania is interested in partnering. They want to do better. We want to improve health outcomes for generations to come, and we recognize we can't do that alone. We need city, state partnerships. We need community partners. It is difficult to navigate, but we all have arms related to our community outreach and our government relations teams. Those are excellent avenues to start conversations and relationships, but if I'm honest, and Jefferson has the Philadelphia Collaborative for Health Equity, which is a whole arm they've stood up that focuses solely on identifying initiatives and programs that reduce healthcare disparities. But more broadly, what I've found to be most successful is the relationships that are cultivated with just the people, the physicians, the staff. I launched a Fresh for All market at Einstein, Philadelphia in 2018 because of the recognition that there was food insecurities. Philabundance had not yet partnered with any health systems, but we knew that our patients and our staff had needs. And so now we do a fresh food market weekly that delivers 150 pounds of food to 150 families every week. And that is not because we came up with some fancy way to do it. We talked, and I had a conversation, and many of the programs we've started has been just from the passion and the alignment and the community networking that happens with many of the leaders in those organizations. So at every level, ideas come in and they bubble their way up, and there's many routes. So I would say you can take the traditional, community outreach liaisons. We have those people that are out at events and that are doing things, or you can send an email to me. I've started programs from people reaching out, and to your point, you hold people accountable, and I apologize sometimes because if there's 300 emails running through my inbox every day, it may take me a week or two to get back to you, but I take it very personally about responding to the people that I say, reach out to me, I want to talk about this, and follow through. So I think being persistent and knowing that there's multiple ways to get into these big places. It's not one or the other.
Thank you. And I can vouch for Dixie. She always responds to my emails. So thank you, Dixie. So this is an opportunity now if anyone in the audience has any questions for our panelists. So just encourage you to write down on your notes, wave them around, and people can gather them. So just write them down, and if not, I'm just going to continue as well. And if we have any, people bring them up to me. So I'm going to go back to you, Barbie, with a question. So as you can see, we are proud members of Feeding America. And so just asking you, how do you see Feeding America approaching partnerships today, and how has that changed?
Ooh, I like this question. So, I've only been at Feeding America, I was gonna say 8 months. No, time keeps going even though you stop counting. So I'll be there for a year in August. It's almost the same thing. But right before I got hired at Feeding America, our CEO, Claire, reached out. I had done some events for Feeding America in the past, and she gave me an assignment. She said she wanted to know what brings me joy. That was the only question she asked. She said, send me a video about what brings you joy. Now, the advocate in me was like, oh, yes, girl, wait a minute, wait till you get to get this video. And I talked about how what brings me joy is being on stage, and it contradicts so much of my life because on a personal level, like if you know me, I am so shy. I'm very socially awkward, but when I get on stage, you see a completely different person. So I talked about, even though the things that I'm saying are so hard, I felt so empowered because I can't control what happened to me, but I can control what I do with it. So as hard as it was to get on stages and admit my life, it was me owning that this was my experience and this is what I'm doing to change it. The video was supposed to be 3 minutes long. It was 15 minutes that I sent her. And she used the video for one of their opening, for their annual conferences, and provided people both versions. So they got to see the 3 minutes in the conference, but if they wanted to see the 15 minutes, they could. Ever since that video, I have genuinely seen in many different occasions how Claire shows up for neighbors. I remember being in a meeting with her discussing one of the events that I did, and she asked, like, "Are we paying you for this meeting?" I was like, and in that moment, it was like Claire was on the, who is responsible for, like, why is she? And it's like those things that she knew that I was a person with lived experience who was still going through it, and that I had expertise. So while to me, it felt like, this is such a privilege. The CEO wants something from me. She wants to talk to me. She flipped it with like, well, we pay our consultants. Why are we not paying her if we're asking her questions and getting insight? Since then, within my role, I brought this idea to Feeding America, and I thought that they were going to be like, this girl really is crazy. But they didn't. They have given me the power and the backing to make one of my dreams come true. And what that was, again, with my experience, I've been very tokenized. For those of you who don't know, I was in a documentary called A Place at the Table, and it showed my struggle with feeding my kids, but it also showed my journey into advocacy. That's not where I was tokenized. I definitely am very grateful for what they showed, what they didn't show, and how genuinely they portrayed me as a mother. But in my experiences, when I would go to conferences, it was only like, tell us why you're poor. Tell us what it feels like. It was never, what do you contribute? How do you think things can get better? And what I wanted to do with my role in Feeding America, I was like, I want to do a conference. I want a conference that is for people with lived experience. I don't want anybody that doesn't have lived experience there. I want all of the panelists to have lived experience, so not just the audience, but the people who are educating, so that the audience can see that it can be them one day on the stage. But also the transformation of every person. We're flying out 100 neighbors from all around the country to come to DC and share space with each other and learn from each other, and each one of them is going to be paid. So where I was going to conferences, I wasn't being paid, or if I was being paid, I'm still grateful for that. But to think about neighbors taking time out of their lives to fly to DC, time away from work, showing them that consideration that, like, are we paying you up front? We're making sure that, you know, your flights are paid for, your hotels are paid for, you have incidentals, you have ground transportation, all of those sort of things that I personally would not have seen at Feeding America prior. I had never seen it. So the fact that they trust me so much and that they see the value that neighbors have and the importance of building that relationship, making sure neighbors are comfortable and uplifting them, their needs, their voices, and also, you know, letting them know that there's such a stigma around organizations and the word empower, and how we have to empower neighbors to want to do something. We have to motivate, and it's like, no, they have that power. And I think that what Claire is reflecting in the organization is that we know you have power. We are working with you to see how you fit. Sometimes that means you're helping with logistics. Sometimes that means you're telling your story. But that we all are equal partners. We all have a say-so in this. And again, I thought they were going to be like, no, what are you talking about? This is insane. But to know that I can freely bring up these ideas with the understanding that they may or may not get approved, but just even that space to say, like, I think we can do this, you don't find those spaces everywhere. There's so many times where we feel discouraged to share ideas, or they might not be good enough, or there might not be enough money, and all of these things. Feeding America is like, well, we're gonna listen first. Then we gonna figure out how we gonna get the money. But we're gonna listen first and then go into action. And I'm truly living my dream in this role. I have my connection still to the community, but having this power in the organization that I have now also shows me how much my experience wasn't in vain. And in my personal journey, you know, I'm a very spiritual person. This has shown me that all of those trials and tribulations were for a reason. They had to get to the right person so that the changes can be made that don't just affect me, but affect society and everyone else that we interact with.
Not too long ago, Lori and I had the privilege of visiting one of our partners, the U School, and they have an incredible food pantry that is led by their students. So two of the soon-to-be graduating seniors were here earlier, and I had a chance to chat with them, and so that really connects really closely to the next question that I have. But if they are around here, if you haven't said hi to them, please do. The pantry at the U School is phenomenal. But a question for anyone on the panel, the best advice you had to engage youth in volunteering around combating food insecurity?
I guess I can start. So I didn't have the choice in being involved in a lot of the inner workings of navigating systems because my mom didn't speak English when I was growing up. So at 6, 7 years old, I was her translator. So I felt a lot of responsibility even though I was really young. And having 2 kids, my daughter will be 18 in October, and I still get scared every time I say that. And my son is 16. I feel like having someone that's closer in age that people can relate to definitely helps. A lot of kids don't realize that they're going through food insecurity. To them, it's normal. For me personally, so growing up, my father was incarcerated for the first 10 years of my life. And my mom used to take us to this church on 9th and Hunting Park to go get Christmas presents. And she always used to tell me that my dad would just send it to the church. I couldn't figure out as a kid why he couldn't just send it to the house, but I'm like, I don't know, prison system, whatever, I don't know. It wasn't until I was talking about it in 4th grade that one of my very best friends that had heard it for the first time, like, oh, you're gonna go pick up your, was like, that's not, your dad's not sending you that, you're getting that because you're poor. And, you know, at the time, I can't even think about how I received it in that moment, but it impacts me today because facing food insecurity with my kids, there was so much that I wanted to shield them from. There were so many moments where I could feed them, but I couldn't feed myself, or what they were getting wasn't the same thing that I was eating, so I would go hide in a room. I think that as adults, we lose a lot of our playfulness, a lot of the meeting people where they are, and that includes children. As y'all see, I'm not scared to be myself. I'm always gonna joke, I'm always gonna be silly, I'm always gonna be funny, but I can also turn it on and off so that they can see that I am eloquent, I'm articulate, I have good, information to share, but they have to feel like there's someone that they can relate to. I also know kids feel a lot of shame for their parents. Sometimes they don't even want other kids to know that their family is struggling. So creating avenues to open up the conversation amongst each other. Dr. Z talked about having a community of practice, have a youth community of practice, so that they feel like their voices are important too, and that they can start their advocacy very early on and encourage their peers. I know that there's a lot of violence going on in Philly, and there's a lot of conversations about after-school programs and all of these things. Connecting youth to these issues early can be something that will take up their time so that they're not, getting wrapped up in the things that we know are happening across the city.
I like a lot of what you said. I would probably only add to that in that I think from those that we want to get advocacy out, the young folks that we want to have advocacy out of that don't necessarily have lived experience, but exposing them early and transparently. I think a lot of times we don't give the full story or the full information because we don't think they can handle it. And I'm a believer in you sort of raise up a child in the way they should go, and you gotta expose them, and then you gotta show them and move them away from the stereotypical views that come from sort of the protected explanations around things, right? And having that open and honest. And sometimes it starts with the adults, quite honestly, that aren't having those conversations with themselves. But I think if we can create an environment for kids to get the information, have interactions that are authentic, that are transparent, that ignite in them early on that they can actually contribute, that this is not something they just have to feel like, oh, this is sad, that there's something they can be empowered to start doing even now and put some of those action items in place is a way to engage kids.
Well, wow, this has been an incredible discussion, and this time was inevitable that we are going to close with our last question that I love to ask each panelist to answer. So really, to close this out, what keeps you motivated to continue tackling this at times really difficult work fighting food insecurity? So welcome however we want to go, but would love to hear from every panelist.
It's really important to understand that food insecurity is not an isolated issue. Food insecurity is multifaceted, and sometimes because we are involved day to day in just distributing food, we really do forget that there is a whole person there, and there is much more to making life livable than food. There is food, but there's also housing, and the two of them really connect many times. There's health care, there's legal services, there are educational issues, after school and recreational issues. So those of us who are in the area of food insecurity need also to partner with those who are doing other things that are also important to making our society wholesome and making it possible for people to move from food insecure to becoming productive persons. I, for the life of me, don't understand why we're not having computer classes in every food pantry. Really, everyone, because you can't talk about moving from insecurity to security without having some basic computer knowledge. So workforce development is a big piece that we haven't superimposed yet in the area of food insecurity that I'd like to have more conversation about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I think I'll say, is this on? Okay, there we go. I think I'll say a pretty short and sweet because what keeps me motivated is the fact that there's so much to do still, and I see we're making impact. So the combination of seeing that though it's not enough yet, we're actually moving the needle in so many realms, both on health equity and access, food insecurities, and then we have to keep the momentum going. And because because there's so much more to be done, this is not the time to get tired and tarry. So that keeps me motivated.
Thank you, Dixie.
Yeah, I think what keeps me motivated, I see our partner over at Prupp, Rick, neighbor of ours in Camden, and a lot of our great neighbors. I think what keeps me motivated is it's really important work. I mean, it's really critical. I mean, we're talking about human rights. You know, the right to have food for you and your family. I mean, it's the most basic, most fundamental thing out there. And I look back and I realize, you know, other jobs I've had were moderately important or moderately significant. This is really important. And it doesn't mean that it can't be a lot of fun, because I laugh now more every day than any job I've ever had by far. We crack ourselves up, and that's okay to have fun. I think that's part of it. That's part of staying away from the burnout, because you got to be able to smile and laugh occasionally. But just remember, you know, the day you don't really want to do it, or the day you feel like, I'm going to leave a little early today, like it's important what we're doing. It's critical. So thank you to everybody, and thank you to Phil Abundance for, I mean, it's easy to say we couldn't do it without you, and we couldn't do it without you. Like, it wouldn't happen. So to everybody here that's doing what you do, like, thank you. Just you know, remember, this is important.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, what I would say is there's there's always more people to reach. And through COVID, we've distributed a lot more food than we ever had in the past, multitudes more food. But except for initially, there was a significant spike in the households we were reaching in early 2020. But over the course of many years, we have distributed a lot more food, but haven't reached exponentially more households. We've been getting a lot more food to around the same number of households. It's not to say that they're all the same households, because people come in, their situations change. But I think what I would name is that it's our responsibility to reach more people. It's not for people to come to us. It's our responsibility to reach those who need services.
Where do I start? Trying to hold my composure. Well, keep my composure. What keeps me motivated in this work is that I never really had a plan. I started this out of desperation and have sort of been rolling with the punches. And I have seen how I literally went from staring at my two kids and either yelling at them and forcing them to go to bed because I didn't have any food and I just couldn't tell them that. I didn't have the heart to tell them that. Or reading pizzeria menus when I was hungry and staring at the pictures just to get over those hunger pains. And that's not my life today. So when I think about these things and I think about all of my friends who still live in it, when I think about the shame that my kids, may have to face, like it's so much easier to be hard on yourself than to think about, well, you change your life, your kids have so much, to be proud of. So what keeps me going is I never asked for, I don't want to say I never asked for this, because I feel like I put enough time and dedication and hard work to get to where I am today, but I didn't know it was going to take me here. And I just want to encourage other people to know that this can be them too. And I also feel an immense sense of responsibility to the world, to society, to help make a change. I grew up feeling like I was really different from a lot of people in my community, not just by how I looked and my hair and all of these things, but because I always had that rambunctious, but why are we doing things like that? Or why am I not allowed to go to that school that has horses and a great lawn and flowers? Why can't I? And encouraging those people, the ones who are inquisitive, that may be discouraged from that, is like, don't ever stop asking questions. Don't ever be afraid to use your voice. Don't ever, because you don't know where it can take you. I always say that, I'm one of those people that does stuff scared. That's where you insert another curse word. I do it scared because fear only stops you. Fear gives you your no before you get the real no. So if someone can see me and say, well, I bet you she was scared and she did it anyway, and I'm gonna do it too, that's what motivates me. Seeing the actual changes, my advocacy throughout the years led to changes to WIC so that more families could have more food available to them. These little things of progress that show that it wasn't a one-off thing. It wasn't just something with no follow-up. As long as people in my community see that something is working for somebody, they may want to join too. And I've felt so alone throughout my journey that all I want is to build that community. I say all the time, I'm still looking for my tribe. I'm still looking for those people that when I have moments like this that I can't stop crying, and that I feel like the work is too hard that can say like, no girl, you're doing this, like you're doing great and people are looking up to you and you know, you're helping others. Like that's what keeps me going because as I said earlier, there's so many people that work so hard to change their lives and they don't get to see it. So I have an obligation to show people like you can do it no matter what people say, no matter what obstacles. And again, it's hard to say that because the systemic barriers that we have to go through, all of the things that are already in place to keep us where we are is hard to battle. So I don't knock anyone that tries and that it just doesn't work. But I feel an obligation to show people that sometimes it does work. And if I can help you get there, then just call me.
Thank you, Barbie. I think talking about tribe, I think we've all probably met a few more people here today that can join our tribe. So one, please just thank you so much for your time today, sharing your perspectives. It was absolutely incredible and so inspiring. I know when Lori and I were sitting and each of you were slowly confirming that you were coming, we were like, wow, this is going to be a really good panel. And it was an incredible panel. So just thank you so much. Please join me in a round of applause for all of our panelists today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.